just going to click a quick edit pause here. I just got to grab the phone for a second. Hello? Okay, sounds good. We'll see you in a bit. Sounds good. Thanks. Bye.
Car ready? Is the car ready?
Car's ready. So if anybody's ever in this is an unsanctioned plug. If you're in the Ottawa area, OK Tire on Lanthe, they're the best. I've been bringing my vehicles there for years. They're honest, super fast. So.
All right. Yeah.
So we'll see how the editing works around that. Okay, so
yeah,
what do
actually, all right, welcome to Power Platform Boost Podcast, your timely source of Power Platform news and updates with your host, Nick Dahlman, and myself, Ulrike Akerbeck. Hi, everyone. How, Nick, are you doing?
I'm doing awesome. How you doing?
I'm great, thank you. I'm going to Italy this week, so I'm so excited.
Is it this week? I didn't.
Yeah, this Thursday. We're going to Bologna, and I'm just trying to cram in 5 days of work in 3 days. Really, really busy. But I did have time to catch up on the latest news and updates anyways. And we have a list long as ever, don't we?
As always, yeah. So now the first thing you found is from our friend Nick Hayduke, and he posted just a little cartoon on, I think it was LinkedIn. I think it was on Twitter as well, or X, sorry.
Like we're ever going to get used to that.
Yeah,
let's just call it Twitter. Oh, all the name changes. I put a pin on that because
yes, for sure.
Yes.
So,
but yeah, so the dog on fire. I think he's used that before.
Yeah, I have seen the dog on fire before, but of course that where you can inject your own thing, and he talks about Power Pages sites still using local authentication.
Yeah, and so it's a cartoon thing, and then the dog says, Power Pages sites still use local authentication. Everything's on fire, and then he says, "This is fine." So meaning it's not fine, and so it got my head because there's a thread also on LinkedIn where someone asks if it's possible to do invitation redemption using Azure AD B2C, and they're having struggle with authentication and etc. Which we know that's possible, of course, with Power Pages. But it just raises the question: what's new? Is there any news or any insights that someone working with Power Pages documentation, for instance, have some insights into? What's the problem with the local authentication, and why is Hayduke bringing this up?
So it's a good question, and I wouldn't say there's anything new with it, but I think something that it comes up for discussion is local authentication for Power Pages or even Power Apps portals is officially considered deprecated. Now, what does deprecated mean? Deprecated means it's not necessarily being pulled out or removed or being uninstalled. What deprecated means, they're not going to enhance it any further. So it is the way it is. And if Power Pages evolves to the point where local authentication won't work anymore, they're not going to upgrade it at all along with everything else. Now, that being said, though, local authentication does continue to work. I think it works well in a sense of when you provision a new Power Pages website, it just works out of the box. When you're doing Power Pages in a day, just to demonstrate some of the concepts, or when you're doing a demo, or for me when I'm doing presentations, I'll stick with local authentication just because it just works. I can demonstrate things like web roles, table permissions, and all of that stuff. It just sort of works very well. When you get to the point where you're going to move your site to a production instance, this is where you might want to consider bringing in those external authentication providers like Azure B2C, or tying it into something like a LinkedIn or a Facebook authentication. Twitter/X is actually not, it is being deprecated, it is being removed, just an FYI. But the idea there is you should be doing that. And then why should you be doing that? Well, at the end of the day, that it's that password that's being used for that local authentication. It is being encrypted, but it is still being stored in Dataverse. And it's probably I don't think it's been there's been no hacking or anything like that, but still it's just there's a bit of a security concern there. And then in terms of things like password resets or invitation processing and all that stuff, you're relying on some old classic workflows for that you have to go and configure. And then at the end of the day, your Power Pages administrator is responsible for helping with that user authentication and password resets, where using a third or an external provider, then they have all the mechanisms, they're being updated, they're constantly being patched. It's just a much more secure, better way to do authentication and can tie into other things. So if bottom line is working on a Power Pages site, I'd say local authentication is fine for a demo or doing training. And even if you're playing and experimenting, it works great. You don't have to worry about this whole external authentication setup. But for a project, and I think like you sort of do the same thing, it's like implement a different authentication provider for a production website.
Well, I go a step further. I say always use Azure AD B2C done. And then if you have any provider or the identity provider you want to use, you hook up to Azure AD B2C. Mm-hmm. And you always have that middleman. And I think, the new wizard, as a 3 years old wizard, that I'm not sure if it's GA still, but that will do that for you. So there's an easy WYSIWYG thing where you go click through that wizard and it will hook that up and it will set up the Azure AD B2C tenant that you would need in Azure. Well, that is something we used to have to do manually. That is now done for you. So there's really no excuse in my book not to use Azure AD B2C. It's secure, it's like you said, and you outsource that security to Azure where it should be. And then your portal admin don't have to think about that anymore. So that is definitely the best way to go with that in my book anyways.
Yeah, and that's and it's funny you talk about the wizard. That's a fairly recent development that the Azure B2C wizard has been implemented for Power Pages. It was there for Power Apps portals for the longest time, and then it was just only recently added to Power Pages. If you tried to use the wizard, it just wasn't available. And I remember going, wait a minute, where did this go? And I asked the question, and it's like, oh yeah, it's anyways. So it's there now. So yeah.
Oh, that's news. I didn't know that.
Well, there you go. Okay, maybe that's what's new. Okay.
And actually, you've been a consumer of Learn lately too, haven't you? Doing some certifications, some exams.
Yes. So last week. So
then you got your taste of your own medicine, right? Reading docs.
A little bit, yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, I definitely look up stuff in docs all the time because trying to learn new, trying to do things, see what's going on. It's interesting. So yes, I think I told you, and I kind of posted this as well. With the certification exams, I let it expire. I let quite a few exams expire. I saw, as we all do, your PL200 is going to expire in 3 months. Like, cool. I have all the time in the world then. And then you get another email like, okay, I need to get on that. And then another email like, oh shoot, I need to get on that. And then all of a sudden like, oh shoot, I need to do that renewal. And then I realized, crap, that expired last week. So that means you're back.
Happened to me this summer as well. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So back at square one. So I thought, okay, I need to get my certs up to date. And then I've also, the question is, why do you keep your certifications up to date? So for me, also being an MCT, a Microsoft certified trainer, you do need to have active certifications in order for you to be qualified to deliver the Microsoft official content. Not that I'm doing that a lot these days, but it's still just good to have in my back pocket. So there's that sort of the business reason to keep on top of these certifications. And then the other thing to me is like, and now reviewing, for instance, I did the PL200, going through a lot of the material and realizing, you know what, I haven't done a lot with PVA, for example. This is on the PL200 exam. You need to understand a lot of these concepts. So it forces you to get exposed to something that you might not normally be exposed to in a project or something that you're working on. And in my case, like PVA is a good example. Power BI is something else I haven't done a ton in. And then going through the examples that they have, the learning material, the labs, the learning paths, that forces you to try this out. And then what does that give you? This gives you another tool in your toolbox that when you're discussing with a client or you're talking to people about implementing a project, you say, hey, this sounds like a really good use case for PVA, or this sounds like this should be a Power BI report as opposed to something else. So now that you've actually done through the certification and you understand it a little bit and how it fits into the greater Power Platform, you're better off equipped as, in this case, it's for a functional consultant, but even as a solution architect or a project manager or whatever your role is, maybe you've not done something, but now that you've had exposure to it, you realize, hey, there is this tool out there. I have at least a high level idea of how it works and how it can be implemented and how it can tie into everything else. So to me, that's the true value of these certifications, is just to get that exposure. And then of course, at the end of the day, just because you write the PL 200 doesn't make you a functional consultant. Just because you write the PL 400 doesn't make you a pro developer. But what it does do is sort of set you up for success, that when you actually do the hands-on work, you become truly a pro developer. Because I think, to me, field experience is, I think, the almost like 98% of your success of being in the role is getting that experience, that hands-on, doing it, learning. That's the best way for learning and everything like that. The certification is just more or less the icing on the cake to sort of say, yes, I can answer a bunch of questions. I understand the concepts. I understand what Microsoft's trying to do with it.
Yeah.
So.
And also that you know everything. I keep coming back to this, that there's you can't throw anything at me that I don't know about or have heard about. I know all the corners. I've seen all the bits and pieces. I may only know the surface, but I know that I know everything there is to know about the product or the platform, right? So
I think
on that top tier,
knowing everything you need to know. I think knowing where your limits are, knowing what questions to ask. Like, we know this project is going to need Power BI, for example. Well, at least I know what Power BI is, so now I know what questions to ask a Power BI expert. Hey, here's our requirement. I understand Power BI can do this. Explain to me more, because a colleague, you're an expert in Power BI. Here's how we're trying to fit it in. And this is where the true collaboration comes in as well. Just having at least that familiarity of what the product can do and what everything can do. But there's no way you can be an expert in everything. But having that surface knowledge allows you to work better with the experts in those particular areas.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, very valuable for sure. And also being a trainer, so this week on Wednesday, when this is released actually, so I'm doing a full day workshop with the local Italians about the Power Platform, just a kind of an app in a day scenario, just so that the next day they'll be able to talk to a customer during lunch and know somewhat about all the products and what's possible within Power Platform. I think that's the essential thing that you need to learn from the get-go. And then you know what fits you or what's, your interest areas, and then you can dig deeper. But then you have a starting point. I think that's the most important thing as well, to get that starting point.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure. Get you to Hello World. And
exactly, right?
And then let's move on from there. So that's, values of certifications and the app in a days and things like that. Like, I know people look at it like, oh, that's really simple. Like, no, but get you in the door and get you trying stuff out and experiment, and just sometimes you just need that little push. So
and then you established a framework for learning more as well. So for me, for instance, I'm not a Dynamics consultant. I never was. I've been in SharePoint. I know SharePoint extensively, and then Power Pages. But Dynamics, the security roles, for instance, have no idea. Business process flows, worked with them once. I'm just starting to build model-driven apps. I can build the simple ones, but I don't write plugins. I'm not a Dynamics consultant. But last week I put a business process flow together for a customer, and I needed to work out and it was surprisingly difficult to get it showing up. I can see it in the model-driven app designer, but once I published the thing, it didn't show up for anyone. And I was just, what am I doing wrong? And I Googled, and to be able to read what I found, the blog post that I found, I was able to because I have somewhat of an experience with some different parts of Dynamics through working with Power Pages, I was able to understand, and I've seen security roles before. I've seen that how you apply those permissions. I did know the concept of the teams, and I was able to put them together just by having those small, vague hooks to put things on. And so I was able to get it to work just by Googling and finding a blog post and whatever. So, and I actually thought about putting a blog post together as well, just the 17 things I needed to check in order to get my business process flow to work. Because once you've done it that one time, I don't think you realize all the hurdles and small little details you need to get right for that thing to show up for the right users, right?
Yep. And those make the best blog post is someone who knows nothing about something and about their journey, putting it all together. And
Absolutely.
You should, and I know you're a busy person, but you should totally do a blog post on that.
It's all in here. It's all in my head, and I think there actually is 17 small little details. But then just a little shout out to my buddy Thomas Onser as well, or CRM Keeper as he's known by. He has a blog post this week actually about security roles and the 3 phases of security roles, talking about this exact thing. As a beginner, you create the role, probably for you have a persona in mind, and you give that role some permissions, the CRUD, to create, read, update, delete, append, and then that's very impossible to maintain, because that is a role applied to a user, and then in a big organization that would be chaos pretty quickly and impossible to maintain. So then you have the concept of the teams that you can create, where you collect different roles and you put that on a team, so whenever you assign that a user a team, then they get those roles, and you can have personas for teams, right? And I see you're nodding, so I'm on the right path. I got that correctly, right? And then the last thing of that journey is, once you understand it, you can have Azure AD security groups or user groups, and then you assign those groups to the teams that have those roles, and then you have successfully outsourced the access or user access to the IT department, and then suddenly you can add users to the resource groups in Azure, and then everything flows perfectly. In a perfect world it would, and I'm sure it doesn't, but then the majority of your users would be given that access that they need without any more concern.
Yeah.
So thank you, Thomas, for a very good blog post.
And also an area on the PL200 that you need to know, security and teams, owner access teams and user access teams, and the Azure AD groups and what you described there. And again, that's something that that has changed a little bit over the years and new features. So if you've written the CRM 2011 customization and configuration exam thinking you can go into this, no, this is why it's important to keep these certifications renewed as well, because things change. So and that's the nice thing with the renewals. If you don't let it expire, you can go on MS Learn and fill in, answer some questions, but those questions are on the new stuff, so it's additive to your knowledge. So that's why it's important to stay on top of that renewal, not just for yourself to keep your certification update, but just to keep on top of what's coming and what's new that you might have missed. Because even as much as we say this podcast is about news and information, there's no way we can cover every little thing, or else this podcast would be 5 hours every week.
We struggle to keep it under 30 minutes.
30? Oh, is that what we're doing?
No, I think I've given up on that.
So
yeah, and then you have other community members also help us keep up to date. For instance, there was a video that Scott Durow published this last week, I think, about, and then the catchy title is "Stop Designing Your User Interface?" ? But the real thing, it's about Fluent too, right? So
Scott wins the clickbait title of the week award.
Yeah, so if that was Neil Benson's podcast with Chris Hunting for last week or last episode, then yeah, Scott Durow wins.
There's actually Neil reached out to me on that one, so I'll fill you in later. Clickbaity titles.
Oh, I love it. Oh, perfect. All right. No, but actually it's a very good video explaining also a bit of the journey that we've had with user interfaces and Dynamics 365 and CRM, and why things look a certain way, why it's changing now, and the impact that will have on the user experience and how we create model-driven apps going forward. And it's an experimental feature that you can turn on right now, and if you have that enabled in your environment. And we've talked about it before. We announced it just a couple of months ago, I think, when that was new, that modern design was coming to the model-driven apps and Canvas apps as well. It will have an impact on user experience of the new apps that you build. You will have new components ready, available to you, and it will create a much more modern and probably a better user interface as well. So, well worth a watch. And then Scott Durow, that's quality through and through. I think that he's best in the community. No offense, but he's.
I know where I rank.
It's just a notch better quality, his videos and his work, than anyone else. I'm so impressed.
Oh, absolutely. Like I watch those because I for me, when I do a video, and I've done a few, like I'll turn on the camera and I'll just start working away, and like Scott's got cutscenes, he's got other things coming up, he's got graphics. It's like it's an entertainment blitz where. So, I mean, everybody has their styles, but totally impressive. Good work, Scott. Big shout out to you. And, of course, we'll have a link in the show notes. But speaking of, like, videos, another great person who does amazing videos, in my mind, for the community is Eliza Benitez. And she has, I love her title. She has WTF is the name of her channel. As I think most people know about Eliza, it's What the Flow. And of course, she was doing videos on a lot of different things beyond just Power Automate. She's done stuff on portals and some model-driven apps. And this week, she posted a video on how to use Power Apps cards for Dataverse notifications. And I've looked a little bit of adaptive cards in the past, but this is like the next generation of Power Apps cards, and then using those notifications into Teams, but also having the hyperlink and that was really the core of a lot of this video, was how to build out those hyperlinks that if you do get that message in your Teams channel of something new, that you can click back to the record in your model-driven app. So it's very technical, but there is a lot of interesting stuff there.
Yeah, no. So Eliza's video has a blog post to it. And I actually have one of my students, she's working with Power Automate, and it's the same customer that we're using the business process flow for. And this is really something we're working on these days. So that blog post was just so perfectly timed. And she's using environment variables for storing details about the environment to build that URL. And that was exactly what my students struggled with. So it was just perfect timing. And yeah, really good work. And I love the fact that the blog post starts with, if you're going to the solution and you add, new, and then you add the card, which you think would be the right way to do it, because that's the right way to do a lot of things in solutions in Power Platform. It's not. Don't go that way. And that's the first thing in her blog post. I just love that. So calling out first and foremost, don't do it this way. This is the right way to do it. Great. Yeah.
Awesome video. Big shout out to Eliza. And of course, we'll have the link there. And we'll see Eliza in Vegas as well. And just a bit of a spoiler alert, we've recruited her to help in some of our daily updates as well for the podcast. So, speaking of like environment variables and things like that, we're talking about segues, right? The custom connectors in solutions has become general availability. I think earlier this week they announced that. So that means you can do custom connectors in solutions. Environment variable secrets using Azure Key Vault secrets, which is good if your environment variables are holding things like API keys and password keys and things like that. You need to store that there, and also connector activity logs. So we'll definitely have the link to the announcement there. Now this is, I love the program managers at Microsoft and the teams, and I love how they do these announcements of the GA, where I'm sure 6 months earlier they did the announcement of this new feature coming out. So it's kind of like they get double whammy on one particular feature. It's like, woohoo, we got Power Automate in, Power Pages now, and it's, in preview. And then I'm sure in a couple months or I think in a couple months when it comes GA, there's going to be another blog post like, "Woohoo! This is now GA." So it's double duty. But I just wanted to call out. That was just an announcement this week, but also the fact of sometimes you get the question of, well, what's I think preview and GA. I know that maybe I'm not going to name names or point to myself or anybody may have used preview features in actual live projects before waiting for GA. But just to clarify what the real difference is, if you have something in preview and you have a problem with it, you still can open a support ticket, and they will help you. But at least I believe the way they always have the out to say, well, technically this is preview, so if we can't completely solve what your use case is or your problem, you're left to your own devices. Whereas if it's GA, then support has they need to help you fix it, as long as it's being fixed within the context of how the feature works. Of course, all those other caveats around that. Now that being said, though, with the preview features is also they're looking for feedback. So they are interested if you're running into problems, because then at least they can address those as they bring it to GA. So definitely keep that feedback coming, but also be warned that sometimes preview features may be in preview for a long time. I've seen preview features for multiple years, and then also sometimes preview features get changed or reworked, and the engineering team has license to do that because it's still considered preview. They try not to. They try to, when something's going to public preview, it should be as close to a fully baked status, but that's not always the case. So so again, nothing wrong with the team shouting out GA preview and everything. It's great, it keeps us informed, but again, just sort of a public service announcement in terms of don't always use preview features you shouldn't use preview features in your production always, sometimes.
Very convincing, Mr. Dolman. No, but I know for a fact, for instance, the Azure AD B2C wizard thing that we talked about earlier was, I think it was public preview, not GA, for I don't know how long. And it didn't do anything. It just created, or it did do anything. It did create an Azure AD B2C tenant in Azure, and then it configured some new site settings, and that was it. So it didn't really do any damage. And so I was curious to why wouldn't that be a GA thing? And we used it in production forever and ever because it didn't really do any harm. It just did whatever we would have done manually anyways, and so it didn't make sense for that not to be. So probably something that's underneath some stone somewhere, or some customers far, far away, where it could be potentially a problem, but for anyone else, it wasn't. So
this is where you employ a technique, and George Dubinsky came up with this, I think, is UCS. UCS means use common sense. So
okay, yeah. Well, that's a dying art, so you can't really base anything.
It is,
anywhere.
but yeah, it's as
now
well.
We sound old. Let's get back to the news and updates, shall we?
Exactly.
And then speaking of old, I know where you're going next. I want to hear you say where you think we're going now, Nick.
You're going with the fact that I accidentally over-edited last episode. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, the cluster beep. Yes. No, I was actually going to TikTok, but you do your cluster beep first.
Okay. Oh, okay.
And then and then we can do the TikTok thing afterwards. Mm-hmm.
Oh, sounds good. So, if you remember last week, we talked about all the new podcasts that we were listening to over the summer and getting excited about, and then when the episode went out and the re-listen, I'm like, okay, we only talked about the Amazing Apps podcast, and we missed a couple, and then of course you pushed out all the socials as well.
So efficient, right?
Yeah, exactly. We're a well-oiled machine. It's just one of the pieces fell off on my end. So part of it is we had to. I was in the re-editing. I accidentally dropped, and I still don't know how. But anyways, we talked about two other podcasts that came up over the summer that we were interested in. The Tech Roll Revolution with Lucy Bourne and Janet Robb. Now it's interesting. Since then, they've wrapped up their first season or their first series, and hopefully they'll. It's not that it's not ending. I think they just were doing it in chunks, and they had, I think, 5 or 6 episodes. And it looks like they're taking a bit of a break or something. But hopefully, I'm not sure when they'll be back soon. Maybe they've announced that, but. Still, check out that podcast, The Tech Role Revolution. Very interesting. They have interesting conversations with different people of the community and different things, and just about implementation. And if you're implementing Power Platform projects, definitely very, very interesting podcast to listen to, and their experiences and their guests and how that works. So
yeah, and actually, they managed to do video on their podcast on Spotify. That really, that inspired us. So let's see what we can do going forward as well. Yeah, really good podcast, girls. I really, really like it. And then another podcast that's really cool in my book, Tino Rabe. He has the Power Pages newsletter, comes out every week, summarizes all the news and updates for Power Pages specifically, and he now has a new podcast as well called the Power Pages Pro. It's on Spotify. I think it's one episode is out, and that's a conversational style interview, talking to people in the community type of thing. So that episode is about how to do Power Pages projects. What kind of questions would you ask when you go into a project with a new customer? What's important to get up front before you start working, etc. I really, really like it. It's a great episode. And then he also has on the details about how his podcast is going to work. He also will have news episodes, a summary of all things new for Power Pages, probably linked to the newsletter, and then also clinic versions where you can probably get answers to specific problems and questions. So if you have any questions or problems that you can't solve with Power Pages, try sending it to Tino and see if maybe they can do a clinic episode on that. So really, really looking forward to see what he can do with this new podcast. And I think someone is feeling a bit of heat in the competition. We got a couple of guys doing Power Pages podcast already. So feel the heat, guys. You got a bit of competition.
Yep, for sure. It's amazing to see, like, a few years ago, even to say we're going to do a podcast on Power Apps portals, like, are you crazy? That's such a niche thing, and now there's more than one. So interesting.
I love it. Gotta love it. And then talking about Power Pages, there were some announcements this week as well for the Copilot. So
yes.
Just in short, just to mention it, I know we're no, but still. So 6 new improvements for Copilot regarding Power Pages. You will now have the Copilot pane in the Design Studio. So that would be the right side pane with the Copilot that we're now used to from Power Automate and for Power Apps, or Canvas apps, sorry. There's a simplified page creation and design model or feature that is also linked to Copilot, of course, where you can ask Copilot, please give me create a page with an About Me section, or create a page for this new product, for instance, and it will create a page for you with content, with images, with the different things that you would need, and a layout for that page. Really neat. You are now able to access a massive stock image library, which I've used just this past week. It's very, very cool. And those are the pictures that you see. Is you're allowed to use them. So the copyright thing is where you can use them free.
Yes,
so
on your own sites. Yeah.
No strings attached.
Power Pages site.
Exactly. So, and then efficient form creation, you can create forms from using Copilot. You can also have it create a theme for you. So you'll be able to ask Copilot, please create a theme that looks like Coca-Cola, for instance. And it will create that theme based on the colors that it finds on coca-cola.com or whatever. And then you can apply that to your portal. Now, that may sound like a pretty crazy thing, because who would ever need that? But actually, that is part of the work that I do with every new Power Pages site that I do. I will have to go and the customer says, okay, we have a website, this is the URL. I want that theme, the font, the color, the logo, everything. I want that on my Power Page site because I want it to look exactly the same. And for that feature, it would actually do bulk of that work for me, and I can't wait to get my hands on that. And also the improved in-context experience for generating text. And just these are the 6 improvements that are coming. I'm talking about this in Vegas, so Microsoft Power Platform Conference. This is one of the topics that I'll cover, styling Power Pages. So if this is your thing, then make sure get to Vegas and get to that session, because that is exactly what we'll look into.
Perfect.
How to do that.
Yeah.
Use those new tools.
And some of these features have, if you have a US tenant or even a Canadian tenant, depending on where you are in the world, some of these features have rolled out already. Some of them will be coming. I think the website creation is coming a little bit later. So that just so you don't have to use templates and things like that. But for some of these things, you can actually try them out now and provide feedback to the team as well, what works, what doesn't work. They're definitely interested in hearing that, and so do that, check that out. It's exciting times.
Oh yeah.
All right, are we gonna talk about TikTok?
Oh yeah. So I don't even know where to start. All right, we're too old for TikTok, that's for sure.
We're figuring it out.
Yeah, you can say that, but I actually got some private messages saying, didn't we talk about this a couple of years ago, Ulrika? I thought we decided that we were too old for TikTok. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. It was an old mate of mine. And then it occurred to me that I actually posted it on my personal Instagram account, and I had no idea I did that. So, Nick, officially, I am too old for TikTok. It's not happening.
Okay.
I'm putting it dead. And we didn't talk about this before we started recording. No. I'm done. I'm out. If you want to do TikTok, you're welcome. I'm out. But I have statistics to back me up, because last week we had the Boost Quest that we usually do.
Yes.
So we publish an episode every week, and then the other week we would do a Boost Quest with a question for you guys. And last one was, what social media platform would you prefer for news and updates about the Power Platform? We posted the poll on LinkedIn, and then we try to share that across all the platforms. And also, that's what the video on TikTok was all about, the one video that I did, the only I'll ever do, to get some people to answer our poll. We got 74 votes, and 91% prefer LinkedIn. 4% says X, Twitter, or a clone. 3% says Instagram, and 3% says TikTok. So, with that in mind, I'm telling you, I'm done.
Okay.
Not happening.
Okay,
people don't want it. I'm not going to do something that people don't want, and people clearly don't want TikTok.
Yeah,
so
to be fair, that poll was on LinkedIn. Now, also, we're not going to stop. We're not going to pick one or the other, right? This is just a consolidation of everything. It was actually, but it's interesting. Dan Lakowitz and April Dunham and stuff, they're out of the cloud advocacy team. They do a lot on TikTok, and I think they've been at it for a while, kind of getting the hang of it. So they're getting some engagement there. But again, it's different audiences and things like that. I'll probably dabble a little bit. To be honest, I'm completely lost. I'm all thumbs in this thing. Like, click here, click there, and I see the feed, and I'm seeing a bunch of this stuff that has no relevance to me at all. Like, I don't care. But anyways. So we'll see how this goes, and we'll revisit this as well. But at the end of the day, we're not leaving. Like, we'll continue to post, I think, primarily on LinkedIn, on Twitter, X, whatever, plus a couple of these other ones that we do. I think somehow we get a lot of stuff done on Facebook as well. It seems weird.
That's only my aunts, so don't worry about that.
Okay, fair enough.
It's my old aunts and uncles. They love the podcast.
Yeah, they just like everything.
You see it in the stats as well. My hometown is very represented. Yes. So very, very well.
Well, you're
thank you.
Well, you're
Tante Mette och Tante Annette, tack.
You're a local celebrity.
Oh yeah, for sure, definitely. Can walk down the street, can go to the grocery store. I think I need an assistant.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. I think that concludes the list. Or do you want to talk about the licensing?
No, don't want to talk about licensing.
I'm just kidding. It's not on our list.
I want to say what?
Oh, but we do have something to talk about. We were nominated for the UK Community Awards.
Yes.
And actually, so I because you know this about me, and I said, I wrote a post about, because I get starstruck so easily, And to see my name on a list like that, it took my breath away for a second, and I had to pinch myself.
Yeah.
Because that is, that's so cool. So thank you to the person that, I think it takes one vote to get on the list, but just to see my name on there, it's so thank you.
And it's twice. You did see it was twice there, right?
Yeah, I did see that afterwards, because I do what every MEP would do. I searched on the website, on the find in the browser for my name, and I saw that it popped up again. And then, to be fair, I did see a couple of names that were overrepresented. And I think they're having an issue with the list thingy, because there's probably a couple of names that were, a couple of duplicates.
That's okay.
But yeah, no, I did see my name on the list for the newcomer thing, right?
Yes, so, up and rising community stars, which you truly are in my eyes. So, and I think a lot of people. So very I know that there's a lot of really good stuff out there, and just to be nominated, I mean, that's for me. That's all I needed. That's just really cool. Happy with that, and good luck to everybody. And there's a lot of great folks, and I hope and it's just great. This is an opportunity for the community to speak out and who your favorites are. I know we see it in the likes and the podcast downloads and everything like that else, but this was cool.
Really cool. And then shine the light on the people, because they really deserve it. And so many great people spent so much time creating content for free for you guys. And then so the voting starts 1st of September, I think. Mm-hmm. So this is just being nominated. The real voting starts, and then we'll see who wins in the end. And this is also tied. So we talked about this before, I think. The UK Community Awards is linked to South Coast Summit in the UK, and that is the week after Vegas, isn't it?
Correct.
I think I got that right.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's tied to that.
Right. And then we're just, because we are on time here, or getting close to it, but quickly run through the events. You saw the timer, eh? So
yeah.
Okay. So we have Nordic Summit coming up in like about a month. Still sign up for the training. Remember, if you sign up for 4 seats, you get the 5th one for free. If you sign up for my class on Power Pages, I'll give you an hour of my time. I did want to do a very fast shout out to the Microsoft 365 Ottawa event. That was actually something, unfortunately, I'm not going to be in town for. That's the week before Vegas, and doing some traveling in between then. But I do want to shout out to that. If you're in Ottawa, in my hometown, that's going to be at the Microsoft offices. It's a free event focusing on M365 and the Power Platform. I really wish I could be there. I missed it last time as well because I was traveling. So the timing never works out right, but I'll get there eventually. Of course, there's another thing happening in Vegas, which if you've launched Power Apps, you'll see the pop-ups. So I don't think we need to give them. The only thing I do want to mention about that is if you haven't signed up yet, definitely use the Boost 100 and get a $100 discount, because it's not an inexpensive event either. But the other thing too is we're going to be there, and if you can come up to either of us and show us that you're a subscriber to the podcast, we'll give you a sticker. And I don't know, maybe we should talk about some other swag too at some point. See if anybody's bought us beers lately that we can put towards a swag allocation. Oh yeah.
And if you have some, what would you like for swag? We have stickers, but what else could we do? If you have anything that you've seen anywhere else, or something you come up with, and let us know, and we'll look into it.
Yeah, look into Power Platform Boost socks maybe, or something like that. Anyway.
Oh yeah, my drawer is full by now. It's I think I have every flavor. The last 10 events that I've been to, I think, have given me socks. My daughter loves them, so.
Cool.
Yep.
We got South Coast Summit coming up, what we just mentioned. In November, the European SharePoint Office 365 and Azure conference. Again, we're not here as advertising. We like to shout out these events just to let the community know. But what I like about the the SPC group, it's the same group that does the European Power Platform Conference that they just did in Dublin. And I like to give them a special shout out because they put on a really, really good conference, so professionally run, so treat the speakers really well. I just want to give them a shout out because it is such a cool thing. And then there's a whole whack of other events and things coming up. So definitely check out the community event site that Guido's put together, the communityevents.it, and that will give you a lot more of the local community things. So I know I whizzed through this, but just keeping an eye on time. We talked about Boost Quest.
Now you keep an eye on time.
Oh, wow.
Closing up on an hour. If you could, consider checking the time a little earlier, Mr. Dolman. And maybe
it's on me.
We'll be on time one.
I thought you were the time. You were the time cop. Or now I'm be the time cop.
Oh, right. Okay, mister. We'll see about this.
Okay.
Yep. All right. But thank you so much for listening, everyone. If you're still there, then it means that you're enjoying this, and we're very grateful for you. So thank you.
So I'll wrap things up then.
Okay. Yes, please do.
Okay. And so again, we'd love it if you would buy us a beer, buy me a coffee /PowerPlat Boost. And if you like this episode, and like I just mentioned, you're here to the end, definitely share it with your friends and colleagues. We definitely appreciate that. Sharing on social media as well. Thank you for engaging with us, the shout outs, and we just love it. Definitely give us a rating on your favorite streaming service. That definitely helps too. And again, thank you for listening for the Power Platform Boost podcast with your hosts, Rika Akkerbeck and Nick Dolman. See you next time for your timely boost of Power Platform news. And our next episode will be on September 6th.